Just getting things set up. Instagram being the hardest one so far. All right, here we go. Hey, welcome. I'm talking about the seemingly small tasks that seem to extra suck with ADHD, and how we tend to not be amazing at those. So, if you have any questions, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm gonna completely talk from no script because I didn't have time to prepare one. So, a lot of times, and this happened, it was inspired by a consultation I had this morning to talk a little bit more about how it really is the tiny things, the seemingly small things that suck so much with ADHD. And partly because they can pile up because the normal world expects, oh, yeah, you can totally do like 10 different phone calls. And so the analogy a lot of times I'll make is if somebody says, hey, would I like to do make 3 phone calls or manage a giant project, I'm gonna wanna pick the giant project because those seemingly one-off tasks can really pile up. And there's a lot of different reasons. One of them is we do have shorter working memory compared to other people of otherwise similar intelligence. And so, um, hey Linda, hey Kurt. So one of the things that we can get tripped up on is because we have the shorter working memory, a lot of times just tracking really small one-off tasks gets overwhelming really fast. We get overwhelmed, we lose track of things, we can feel bad that we didn't do them earlier. We can feel like, oh, why wasn't I able to do this thing? So we can lose track of them, we can feel worse about them, and we can feel overwhelmed and shut down a lot easier. If I have, 3 tasks waiting for me that I don't have any confidence I'll deal with at a later time, they're just sitting on my brain taking up space. And every time they occur to me, "Oh, hey, I should do that thing." Hello, Kimberly. My brain just shortens things. So every time we can feel overloaded really fast. We can shut down really fast. But as long as part of our brain keeps pinging us, hey, do this thing, hey, do this thing, we're gonna feel bad about that. One of the worst things that we can do is to be reminded, especially of well, to be reminded of any task really at a time we can't do it. If that means that you have sticky notes piled up on your computer and you keep seeing them when you're really supposed to be doing something else, that's going to be a problem. If it's that you're seeing a reminder in your notifications that you keep not acting on, it's likely to pile up and be problematic. That's one of the reasons that we really don't ideally want reminders on or notifications for things that aren't quick and one-off tasks that do take a lot more effort or sit down and planning because it's reminding us at a time we can't do it. We feel bad we can't do it, and then we want to do it less and less. And if it's something you already didn't want to do, then it's only going to get worse. Hello. Um, as that happens, we're going to build up resistance. We're going to hate doing this stuff more. We're going to hate any new tasks that come in that are even remotely similar. And one of the other things that we can really get tied down by is small tasks and big tasks don't feel that different to us. A lot of times we'll feel like, oh, okay, this project, this phone call, if they're not tied together in any way, then if they're just one offs, they're taking a whole working memory slot, whether or not it's actually really fast or really slow. And so it piles up and feels so much bigger. I don't know if you've ever done the thing where you're like, hey, I don't know why I've been putting that thing off for months, for years, because once it happens, it's like, oh, but it was so much better once I actually did it because it didn't feel big. And the longer it's been there, the bigger it feels. Where I'm from is slang for, I think that's a comment on somebody else's name. I'm not sure. Anyway, um, Oh, task is slang for, oh, gotcha. That's funny. I don't know how to say it other than task, so just enjoy the double entendre, I guess. But he said it's the same as urine. So, okay. But maybe that's how you feel about your task, that it's piling up just like that. So, where was I? On the it wasn't on the oh, it was on how big they feel. And when there's something that we haven't done for a really long time, you can always do a joke. I just may not be able to read it. uh, when we get things piled up to a certain amount, uh, they're they're going to pile up in our head. I have an infant. I have not slept enough, obviously, for reading, chat, and talking simultaneously today. Um, so when the things start feeling really big, we're going to build up what my friend Brenda Mahan calls the wall of awful, and the thing becomes so big. And the thing could be something that originally started off small, like for example, um, I get a reminder that, oh, hey, it's time to schedule another dentist appointment in the mail. And I'm like, okay, I'll totally go look at that. But I should do it soon before it becomes this gigantic thing. And then you don't, and your dentist retires. And now it's this whole thing of like, oh crap, I got to find a new person, but I don't really like this person, but I don't really know where to look or where to start. And now I don't want to find out how bad my teeth have become in the meantime. Like the thing becomes so big and emotionally charged that it becomes even harder to deal with. And the more of those we have piled up that are seemingly small, then we're going to feel bad about it. It's going to add to our like emotional backlog. And it legitimately is at a certain point kind of too hard to do on our own. A lot of times we can only get out of that by seeking outside help because it can emotionally be so intense that we're just really not able to face it on our own. And it's something that again to an outsider seems so small. Because it felt small in the beginning, that's just a reason we're harder on ourselves for not doing it, even though it's so common, at least in my world. Those things, hey, um, someone said they have ADHD, usually get stuff done, but if the daily routines aren't in order, the minor stuff can become big. And yeah, you found systems for dealing with it, right? But I bet you found systems because it wasn't naturally quite as easy. And this really, really throws a lot of people. I remember being in a class and the teacher was like, "Oh, the first test is the easy test because it was memorizing facts," which if you're my dad is fine, but I do not memorize unassociated facts very easily. And he goes, "Oh no, the second one is the hard one because you have to apply the knowledge." Well, that's the easy part for me. For me, that applying knowledge is so easy. We have this idea that like if you can't do the job of the assistant, you couldn't do the job of the CEO. And it's not like one, it ranks up naturally to the other. These are completely different skill sets. One person needs to keep track of small things, oversee the day to day. The other person is probably trying to do big picture vision type of thinking. These are not the same skill set at all. It's not that, oh, I couldn't possibly do this one because I didn't work my way up. They're just different brain types entirely. But we still sort of, even though we don't necessarily expect the CEO to work themselves up from administrative assistant, we still have this idea that we still have this idea that we won't if we couldn't do the small one, we wouldn't be able to handle the big one. It's just part of the culture a lot of the time. And I don't know what to tell you. They're my teeth. Somebody asked for my teeth. So other things with small tasks, and of course, if anybody has any questions or comments about their own small tasks, I'd love to hear them. Um, a lot of times, one of the ways that we can kind of get not past it, because we can still be like, oh, this is huge and feel like it's big. But if we have a way, it's the completely unrelated tasks that get to be so hard. I mean, I'm not saying that making a phone call is like usually ever easy for us because we can build it up so big in our head. But if we can get on a streak sometimes, or sometimes tie them together with other stuff, and then use the big picture thinking to say, hey, I can see this as a big whole. I'm not necessarily seeing it as just one tiny piece. Sometimes that can be a way that we can not get over it, but not get quite as overwhelmed. Sometimes people will be like, "Oh, I've got this energy down, so while I'm here, I'm gonna do a bunch of other similar things." And so they may say like, "Hey, Monday's my administrative day, so that's the day I'm gonna make all the phone calls or do all the small tasks." Other people burn out on the small tasks so fast that they might say, "Oh, okay, I'm going to do, one a day or something like that," or not feel like they have to do more. Um, there's another option that's a little bit of a combination of the two, which is the narrative of I only have to do one, and then if I feel like it, I can do more. Where it's permission to stop so that we don't, because for some people, a whole day of admin is their worst nightmare. And so they might be like, oh, yeah, I'm never going to do that. And so one way to get around that is to say, well, I'm going to do this one. Then if, I feel like I can keep going, I will do another one, but I have permission to quit after that first chunk of the administrative tasks. And these can be really anything. They can be phone calls, emails. Why is laundry so hard? It seems like such a basic thing to do. And why is it putting it away seems so much harder than, starting it in the first place? But they could both be hard differently. Those types of like day to day, just living in our world things can be the things that exhaust us so much and weigh so heavily on our minds. I use my calendar to remember things. Yeah, yeah. If I say to do that later, 9 times out of 10, I won't get it done. If I don't do it right away. Yeah, sometimes people do the now, like, later doesn't exist. So if I'm in a position where I can just do it now, then doing that before it has to be tracked, before it has to be a thing we remember to do, before we start feeling bad we haven't done it already, that could be great. And the calendar works for some people. It sort of depends on how many of these things you have to track and how actively you use your calendar, because sometimes they end up becoming a guilt graveyard of things we meant to do. But yeah, if it's working for you, that's great. I've seen it work and backfire. How's that? Using the calendar. And sometimes it's just about volume. Like, do you have a volume that's an amount you can keep on the calendar? Um yeah, whenever we're super focused on something, which is great, right? Using your super focus, your hyper focus, or whatever you want to call it, using it effectively, that's an important thing to do. It improves happiness, well-being, all kinds of things. But uh but it also doesn't yield itself very well to doing other tasks. When I'm working on starting a course for January. Well, it's currently very hard for me to, oh, right, and I still need to do these day-to-day tasks because I'm so focused on one particular goal. But it's great because I can do that. Oh, if you can't get it done at that time, then it's a reminder for later. Yeah, that's a system, right? You put it on your calendar, and if it doesn't happen, then what? And yeah, if you've got one, it sounds like you've got a system that you're doing, which is great. Um, yeah, I've seen calendars work and not work. It's really about the person. And then I've seen reminders work and not work. And it often does come down to the size of the, like, if it's a notification based reminder, the size of the task and how good we are about doing it when it pops up. Because if it comes up like, oh, I can't do that now, I can't do that now. And every time you see your notifications, oh, I can't do that, it builds up this well of yuck. And and even though I know that, I'll still get that sometimes when, say, um, just got when I get back from the international conference on ADHD, it's so over encompassing that I come back to a whole bunch of tasks that need to be taken care of, and I can get back into that sort of mental and emotional debt. Some people think that ADHD you can't focus, but yeah, right. We focus on what we're interested in and what we're on in that moment. Um, yeah, it's I had somebody say, "Oh, no, no, my child doesn't have ADHD because they can focus on video games." Like, well, yeah, yeah. And sometimes it's about control of focus. Like, how often do I not know where that thing is that I'm looking for, but somebody else said, "Oh, where's my wallet?" I wasn't intentionally watching that, but yet I can pull up a visual of where their wallet is. And they've done some cognitive science tests, and they're about people with low working memory, but probably people with ADHD, um, where it really isn't that there's none. It's more that they didn't have control over what they were doing. Like you said, "Hey, remember these shapes on this side and ignore the right side." Well, how many of the things on the right side can they actually tell you about? And it's a higher number. There's so much focus on one thing, and focusing on several things at once can be hard. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, there's exceptions where things are in motion, right? Like, everything's actively happening right now. There can be a type of, like, hyper focus with split attention that can happen. A really good example is surgery, which sort of is a hyper focused task, but you're also monitoring, like, what's the blood pressure looking like? What's different. I don't do surgery, but I have family members who do. Like, what are the different things that are happening in the body right now as I'm doing this thing? And so, but they're all related. They're all related to that single in that moment goal, right? And so, right, not impossible, but it's either a lot of work or the stars have to line up that type of task works with sort of multiple things monitoring and practice, right? The first time somebody does surgery, they're not going to feel that way. They're going to want somebody looking over their shoulder, keeping an eye on those other things. I'm testing out trying more interactive live streams, right? And so this is a skill set I'm building. But you see people who've done it a zillion times, and, like, yeah, looking at chat, looking at back at whatever they're doing, not a problem at all. But it's a skill set that is built over time. Well, we veered off from a small task, but that's fine. Just the way things go. Um, what else about small tasks? They suck. Like, there isn't really a magical formula to be like, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna just love making phone calls all of a sudden." There's not really a magic bullet. There's ways to make it tolerable. Um, or, keeping track of this one thing is gonna be amazing. There is nothing that will ever make me love taxes. Even when you offload a certain amount, that's great, but then I still will work with people who are not wanting to send the stuff off to their tax person. Yeah, it's gonna be less painful, but you still sometimes need help with that step that's left over. Um, so there are some things that that just suck, and so what are the ways we can find around it? Like, is there somebody who, for example, offloading your taxes, right? Uh, and then there's less to do. Oh, yeah. An example of, when somebody calls in the middle of something all of a sudden, forgetting something else because we were checking on one thing. Like, there's only so many slots to use up, and when something else, especially completely unrelated, gets in the way, then it's gone. Um, the related thing is important. Like, when you hear people talk about cognitive science and chunking, and the most obvious example is a phone number. Like, we don't memorize 10 numbers. We memorize 3 sets of numbers. Area code, and then the 3-digit, and then the 4-digit. At least United States centric, but that's the idea, is we're chunking it down. So we're making these things related. We're grouping them somehow so they don't feel as one off. And so if you have a way to do that so that they, and it's going to be different for everyone. It's very personal. Like, in my gut, do these feel related? Do I see the connections between them, and not loosely, but like in a way that it feels meaningful to me? Then we're able to connect it to something else. Weirdly, and part of this is that the time difference involved in it. Um, weirdly, like, laundry is theoretically all connected, but because there's this, like, gap in time between when I get the stuff out and when it is put away, a lot of times that ends up just being too separate for people. And you end up with the situation of living out of your hamper, um, or basket or whatever it is. Uh, and that's really common because there's something about that time delay that just really gets people. What else do we want to say about small tasks? I decided to talk about this today because I ended up in a situation where they were backpiling on me again, like admin tasks. And I have good strategies for dealing with it, but I thought it was worthwhile, like, having a conversation about it because and it doubles up when, other mental health issues are not working, for some of us who are experiencing winter, like, and if you have a seasonal affective disorder, it can compile and make things even harder to face. So, one of the things I notice is when I'm getting that, "Oh, I hate this," like, internal dialogue when I see a reminder of something, I'm like, "Oh, it's time to address this head on. This is getting backed up to an uncomfortable amount." Ugh, way worse when I was a kid, I could walk home from school forgetting my shoes because I was so focused on something else. Yeah, infamously in our family, we got a call, that we had to, like, change a flight suddenly, and phone call because, it was late '80s or early '90s. And, my brother ended up going to Florida with no shoes. So, yeah. The no shoes is pretty great. Actually, my favorite thing, and I don't know if they still have this in Florida, but uh, Walt Disney World, the, Muppets 3D, they, like, had a big thing that was, like, in space, no one can find your shoes. I was like, "Oh." I just think about that every time I hear an ADHD because that was the trip where my brother left his shoes behind. And so we always quote it in our family, and, yeah, it's now one of my favorite things because forgetting shoes is just one of those classic, for me, heartwarming. Maybe not for other people, but for me, heartwarming ADHD things. It's like, "Oh, yeah, our shoes. That's a whole thing." I mean, that is, like, one of the reasons for something like packing, like, why a list is a good idea if you can do it. "Oh, hey, Natura, welcome. Do you have any questions or thoughts or comments?" Uh, yeah, having lists can at the very least be a reminder, like, at the last minute, "What do I not have?" That doesn't mean if something doesn't get in the way, you'll still end up without your shoes, but how many likes do you want? I'm such a noob, I don't even know what that means. Can you like it more than once? I I do I'm afraid I don't know what you even do with it at that point. Um, I, yeah, I am a huge well, I'm a huge nerd anyway. Um, but how many likes do you want? Oh, 10? I don't know what that means. How many likes do I want? Um, I don't remember what I was gonna say. Yeah, I'm definitely too sleep deprived. Um, lists. Like, they're kind of awesome. I'm the kind of nerd who read the checklist manifesto in one day. 500 sounds great. Thanks. Um, I read the checklist manifesto in one day. It was because I was just so excited by it. It and it's not for specifically people with ADHD. It's just human memory has limitations, and when we're focused on stuff that's big and important, we're way less likely to be aware of some of, like, the smaller things that could be happening around us. And it's just gets hard to keep track of everything. And it's okay if something's not important enough to bother making a checklist for, like, that's fine. But when it's something important, this is totally random, but you hate Star Wars. I'm sorry. Um, when something is important, it's sometimes worth having. I will say I'm not always good at looking at a checklist. And so one of the ways I'll do things is with like automations. So, I'm working on, because this is something I'm trying to do more. Uh, I'm working on having a keyboard maestro thing set up for running live streams, because instead of like a checklist I look at, it just tells me the next thing to do. Um, Someone once told me that having ADHD is like a dog. One moment you go to the bathroom, the next thing you know, you're chasing a ball. There are absolutely those days, when I'm sleep deprived a lot more than that. Because it doesn't connect to Restream, for me, I don't know why, and I haven't been able to figure that out yet, and then I'm also getting comments from YouTube on Restream on my computer, so I've got a phone here and a computer right there, um, for whatever it's worth. Uh, I have had mm, I have had people talk about now, okay, here's a confession. I have not seen Up, but I have had people talk about the Up dog, being the dog from the movie Up, being the ADHD exemplar. So, yeah, I could totally see that. For me, when I'm not sleeping enough, I am way more likely to just completely go off the rails conversationally, especially with other people. But yeah, the more tangents occur to me, and I have way less ability to not go on them. Well, I think I ran out of all the stuff I initially was going to talk about on the seemingly small task, or at least all I can remember at this moment. If somebody has any thoughts on it, talk about it some more. Or I could just go offline. This is more about me getting in habits, and it's something I'll work with people on too. Like, this is about me getting in the habit of doing this and getting more comfortable with it, more than it was about like I'm going to make the perfect thing. So, all right. Thanks everyone, and thank you especially Frederick. I enjoyed your comments for me. Oh yeah, no, I'm happy to answer that, Frederick. Um, I Medications do work for me, but it depends on which one you're trying, and there's different classes that can work for different things. Like if you've only tried stimulants, I wouldn't necessarily assume that, which is usually what people go to first. I wouldn't necessarily assume that none work for you. But there is a true thing, um, where anything that is a real treatment will make some people worse. And the first time I heard that, I found it liberating, I guess. Um, like, oh, okay, that feels feels true at the very least. It was in a research symposium, but it wasn't what they were doing research on. Um, and and so I think that is true. But if all you've tried is stimulants, I wouldn't necessarily rule out. By the way, some people do better on caffeine than like Adderall or Ritalin. Um, and I've heard people that are like, yeah, coffee's really better for me, and so that's what they stick with. But um, another class is alpha agonists, and those tend to help with more like back and forth thinking. So, or back and forth interactions. Their primary use is for rejection sensitivity. So, that thing where like we have a really extra harsh inner critic, or where we are like building up those like really negative feelings about ourselves, about our tasks, um or just taking things people say like really hard. I have one client who's like, it didn't really help me with rejection sensitivity, but they stopped blurting out their life story to people, and like, well, I'll stay on it just for that. So yeah, if it's making it worse, definitely don't go on it. But there are other classes, and then there's some even more rare ones like anamoxetine, and like the Wellbutrin family. There are other ones that might be worth trying, but yeah, if it didn't work, don't use it. I I did not find personally Ritalin helpful at all, but I did do well on Adderall. But if I haven't slept very much, Adderall makes me worse. If I'm not getting regular exercise, it isn't as helpful. So yeah, it's definitely something to explore, but also like pills don't teach skills. Learning systems that work for you ultimately is also going to be really important. Tried a few. Working out, eating healthy, and having a hobby. Yeah, and routines. Those are things I would recommend. Like some people need meds to establish those, and but between you and me and whoever else happens to be here, regular aerobic exercise for people it's possible is really one of the best treatments you can do, just hands down, in terms of just altering our brain chemistry. And that is true whether you're talking about ADHD, anxiety, depression, but all of those things can make regular exercise really hard. So it's not easy necessarily to do, but yeah, if those are working for you, that's spectacular. If something is still missing, then you might want to talk about another treatment option. But if you don't feel like it is currently, then maybe you're just fine like that, you know? Um, and yeah, there is another problem where sometimes people end up on too high of a dosage because they keep waiting for the thing to work. And it's like, well, maybe this just is a bad medication for you. Like that absolutely happens. Well, thank you for that. Anything else? It's such a weird delay that then I have to like keep talking while I wait for a reply because they always work on like a big delay. I don't know if YouTube's is the biggest delay. YouTube's the platform I spent the most time on previously, but it's yeah, it's big. It's a big delay. All right, if that's all, thank you to everybody who dropped by. Thank you for helping me build my streaming skills because for me, that's what this is about. And yeah, I hope y'all have a great day and I will talk with you.